The rain came down hard over Boston that night, cold and relentless, soaking through Ryan Cross's coat as he stood on the darkened porch. A broad-shouldered black man who had spent years in the Navy, he did not move even as the door closed in front of him and the light above it went out. Somewhere inside him, a small voice kept repeating the question a 7-year-old girl had asked with tears in her eyes. "Will you stay?" He had faced enemy fire without flinching. Now one child's whisper had brought him to his knees, and he had walked away. Ryan Cross had not worn a collared shirt in 3 years, and the fabric felt strange against his neck as he stepped into the warm glow of harbor lights. The restaurant sat right at the edge of the water, all soft amber lamps and white tablecloths, the kind of place he would never have chosen for himself. Logan Pierce had told him it was a reunion, a few of the old Navy guys getting together to trade stories and drink overpriced beer, and Ryan had believed him because Logan was the kind of friend a man believed. He was a big man, built solid from years of hard labor, his hands rough and scarred from the boatyard where he spent his days patching hulls and rebuilding engines that other people had given up on. There was a stillness to him that people often mistook for coldness. The truth was simpler and harder than that. Since the night the hospital had gone quiet and the machines had stopped their steady rhythm, since he had buried Maya on a gray afternoon and driven home to a house that no longer made sense, he had learned to keep his grief folded up small and tucked away where no one could see it. Work helped. Raising his son helped. Everything else he had let go. Caleb was 11 now, all sharp elbows and quiet moods, a boy who looked more like his mother every year. That was the thing that undid Ryan on the worst nights, the way his son would tilt his head or laugh at something on television, and for half a second Maya would be alive again in the room. He loved the boy with a fierceness that frightened him. He had promised himself that Caleb would never have to wonder whether he was enough, would never feel the absence of two parents because his father had failed to be present for one. So Ryan showed up. To the soccer games, to the parent conferences, to the breakfasts and the bedtimes. He showed up, and he did not let anyone else in. Logan spotted him from across the room and rose with the wide grin of a man who knew he had gotten away with something. "There he is," Logan called out, clapping Ryan on the shoulder hard enough to move him. 2 other faces from the old unit were seated at the table already laughing, and Ryan felt the first cold suspicion crawl up his spine. "Where's everybody else?" Ryan said, scanning the room. "You said the whole crew was coming." "I might have exaggerated the guest list." Logan pulled out a chair and gestured for him to sit, but Ryan stayed standing. "Look, brother, don't be mad. We've watched you disappear into that boatyard for 3 years. Somebody had to do something." "Do what exactly?" One of the other men, a wiry guy named Marcus, who had served 2 tours alongside them, held up his phone with a sheepish look, as though he had already begun to sense this was a worse idea in person than it had seemed in the group chat. "We were going to get a picture. For the memories. That's all." The word landed before Ryan could brace for it. Logan said it plainly, almost gently, as if softness might take the sting out. "It's a blind date, man. There's a woman coming. We set it up." Ryan's jaw tightened. Every instinct in him said to turn around and walk back out into the parking lot and drive home, and he was halfway to doing exactly that when the door opened behind him and the whole calculus of the evening changed. Sophia Bennett came in shaking rain from a crimson coat, and she was already looking for the exit before she had fully crossed the threshold. She was an architect, though no one at that table knew it yet, a woman who spent her days imagining how light would fall through a window that did not exist and how strangers might one day move through rooms she had drawn on paper. For the past several months, her whole heart had been poured into one project. In particular, the restoration of an old community library in a working-class neighborhood on the south side of the city. It was a crumbling brick building most people had written off, but her late husband Daniel had worked there once years ago, teaching evening classes to people trying to earn their diplomas. And when the commission had come across her desk, she had understood it immediately as something more than a job. It was a way to finish a sentence that had been left hanging for 6 years ever since the accident had taken him. Her sister Grace had told her the evening was a charity mixer. Sophia had believed it, or had wanted to believe it, because the alternative was admitting how transparent Grace's worry had become. You work too much. You come home to Lucy and you love her, and then you sit in the dark. That is not living, Sophia. Grace had meant it kindly. Grace always meant it kindly. That did not make it easier to walk into a restaurant and realize in one humiliating instant that there was no charity, that the mixer was a table of grinning men, and that she was the entertainment. Her eyes found Ryan's across the room, and something passed between them that neither had words for, yet a kind of mutual recognition. Two people who had both been marched into an ambush by people who loved them. "You've got to be kidding me," Sophia said, mostly to herself, and Grace materialized at her elbow with the guilty brightness of a sibling caught in the act. "Just give it 10 minutes, Grace whispered. "That's all I'm asking. 10 minutes. But Sophia was already shaking her head, and Ryan could see the color rising in her face, could see the exact moment the embarrassment tipped over into something raw. Her eyes went glassy. Her chin trembled the way a person's does when they are fighting very hard not to come apart in a room full of strangers. She turned toward the door, and that was when the thing Ryan had spent 3 years burying moved in him without his permission. He had seen that look before. On young sailors far from home, on the faces of people who had been pushed 1 inch past what they could carry. It was the look of someone who had come to a nice place, trying to hold themselves together, and had been handed one more small cruelty instead. Something in him refused to let her walk back out into the rain carrying that. He crossed the room before he had decided to, and he pulled out the chair across from his own with a quiet, deliberate motion, the scrape of the legs against the floor cutting through the laughter at the table. "They got us both," Ryan said, and his voice was low, and even the kind of voice that made loud rooms go quieter. "I didn't know either. If you want to leave, I'll walk you out and we'll let these clowns eat by themselves. But if you want to sit down and have a decent meal and make them pay for it, I'd be honored to buy you dinner." The table had gone silent. Logan had the grace to look ashamed. Marcus had already set his phone face down on the tablecloth, and there was no picture, no punchline, only a man holding a chair and a woman deciding whether to trust him. Sophia looked at the chair. She looked at Ryan. Whatever she saw in his face, it was not the thing she had braced herself for. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh, wiped quickly at the corner of one eye, and sat. "I hope you're planning to order the most expensive thing on the menu," she said. "I insist on it," Ryan answered, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, the corner of his own mouth lifted. Logan and the others, sensing the evening had escaped them entirely, made their apologies and drifted toward the bar, leaving the two of them alone at a table by the window with the harbor lights scattered like broken gold across the black water outside. They talked. Carefully at first, the way people do when they are testing the ground before they put their weight on it. She learned he fixed boats and had a son who played soccer and could take an engine apart blindfolded. He learned she drew buildings for a living and had a daughter and a sister who apparently could not be trusted with the truth. They laughed about the ambush. They ordered too much food. And somewhere between the appetizers and the moment the candles burned low, the careful distance between them thinned into something warmer because each of them had caught the other in an unguarded moment and seen the same thing there. It was in the way Ryan went quiet when she mentioned that she was raising Lucy on her own. It was in the way Sophia's eyes softened when he said almost too casually that his wife had been gone 3 years. Neither of them said the full weight of it out loud. They did not have to. There is a particular silence that two grieving people fall into when they recognize each other, a silence that is not empty at all, but full to the brim. And they sat inside it together for a moment as the rain streaked the glass. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said, finally turning her water glass slowly on the tablecloth. "Why did you really come over? You could have walked out. I was already leaving. You didn't owe me anything." Ryan considered the question longer than she expected. He was not a man who reached for easy answers. "Because you looked like you were about to cry in a room full of people who thought this was funny," he said. "And I know what that feels like. I couldn't just watch it." She held his gaze for a long moment, and something in her chest, some door she had kept bolted for 6 years, shifted very slightly on its hinges. She did not fling it open. She was not that kind of woman, not anymore, not after everything. But it moved. They exchanged numbers in the parking lot under the awning, the rain still coming down. She told him she'd had a better time than she had any right to expect given how the night had started. He told her he was glad he hadn't left. Neither of them promised anything. Neither of them needed to. It was enough that first night that 2 people who had walked in wanting only to escape had found a reason to stay. Because sometimes, a single act of kindness at the right moment, one chair pulled out from a table, is enough to reopen a door we thought we had closed for good. They saw each other 3 more times over the next 2 weeks, before either of them was willing to call it anything. The conversations came easily, but underneath the ease ran a current of caution that neither could switch off. Ryan found himself telling her things he had not said aloud in years, and then catching himself pulling back, aware of how much he had let slip. Sophia did the same. They circled each other like 2 people who had learned the hard way that the ground was not always solid where it looked firm. She told him on the second evening, over coffee at a small place near her office, the shape of the thing she was most afraid of. She did not dramatize it. She simply laid it out the way an architect lays out a plan so he would understand exactly what he was standing near. "After Daniel died, I did everything alone for a long time," Sophia said, wrapping both hands around her cup. "And then about 2 years in, I met someone. He was good to me. He was good to Lucy, or I thought he was. I let him in. I let her get attached to him because I told myself she needed a man in her life and I didn't want to keep her in a bubble." Her thumb traced the rim of the cup. "And then it got hard the way things do, and he left. He didn't do anything dramatic. He just decided it wasn't what he wanted, and he walked out, and Lucy asked me every night for a month where he went. She was 5. She thought she'd done something wrong." Ryan listened without interrupting, which she noticed and was grateful for. "So I made myself a rule," she went on. "Nobody gets near her again until I am certain. Not almost certain. Certain. I can survive getting my own heart broken. I've done it twice now, but I will not stand there and watch her go through it a second time, because I was lonely and I got careless." She looked up at him then, and there was steel under the softness. "I'm telling you this because you seem like a good man, and I don't want to waste your time or mine. That's where I stand. I need you to know it going in." "I hear you," Ryan said. He turned his coffee slowly on the table. "I've got my own version of that. Caleb lost his mom when he was 8. He's 11 now, and there are days I still catch him keeping a plate of her cooking in his head, comparing everything to it. I don't know how he'd take me bringing someone around. I honestly don't. So I get it. We go slow, or we don't go at all." It should have scared them both off that conversation. Instead, it did the opposite. There is a particular relief in meeting someone who refuses to lie to you about the size of the risk. The following Saturday, Sophia did something deliberate. She did not arrange it as an accident, and she wanted Ryan to understand that. She called him in the morning and told him she was bringing Lucy to the farmer's market by the waterfront that afternoon, and that if he happened to be there, she would not mind. It was not a date. It was a test, and she was honest enough with herself to name it as one. She needed to see with her own eyes how this large, quiet man behaved around a small child before she let herself feel one more thing for him. The market was crowded, and loud stalls packed close together under white canopies. A busker sawing at a fiddle near the entrance, the air thick with the smell of kettle corn and cut flowers. Lucy held her mother's hand and took it all in with the wide, watchful eyes of a child who did not warm to strangers quickly. She was 7 small for her age, with a way of hiding half behind Sophia's legs when the world got to be too much. Ryan found them near a stall selling honey. He crouched down without being asked, bringing himself below Lucy's eye level instead of looming over her the way adults did, and he did not reach for her or force a greeting. He just said in that low, steady voice that he had heard she was an expert on which honey was the best, and he could use a second opinion because he honestly couldn't tell them apart. Lucy studied him for a long moment, deciding. Then she pointed at the darkest jar and informed him with great seriousness that the dark one was for winter. It might have gone fine. It nearly did. But the fiddle player near the entrance finished his song, and a group of teenagers set off a string of party poppers all at once, a sharp rattle of cracks that tore through the noise of the market. Lucy flinched hard and went rigid, and then her face crumpled the sudden, overwhelming panic of a small child in a loud place, and she began to cry. What Ryan did next, Sophia would think about for a long time afterward. He did not scoop the girl up, which would have frightened her more. He shifted his broad frame so that he was between Lucy and the noise, a wall of shoulder and back, blocking the crowd from her line of sight, and he lowered his voice even further down to something almost like a hum, and he told her they were going to count the jars of honey on the table together one at a time, and he started counting slow and unhurried until her breathing began to follow the rhythm of his voice. 1, 2, 3. By the time they reached 9, she had stopped crying and was correcting his count because he had skipped one on purpose to make her laugh. Watching him kneel on the cold pavement, patiently waiting for the child to stop shaking, Sophia understood that what was holding her there that afternoon was not his steadiness or the low warmth of his voice. It was the way two strangers so different from each other, so unlike in every surface thing a person could name, had recognized each other through the same old scar. The rule she had built to protect her daughter had just quietly passed its first real test, and she was not sure whether to feel relieved or terrified. That was the afternoon the wall came down and the story turned. They began cautiously to build something, and because both of them had children building it meant weaving 4 lives together thread by careful thread, and every thread held the possibility of snapping. The bridge came first. Lucy had a school project, a model to build out of balsa wood and glue, and she had decided with a child's stubbornness that it had to be one specific bridge and no other. She brought Ryan a photograph soft and creased from handling of a footbridge over a river and told him this was the one. Ryan took the photo and something moved across his face because he understood before Sophia could explain it. The man in the background of the picture, half turned away, was Daniel. It was a photograph of Lucy as a toddler being carried across that bridge on her father's shoulders. A different man might have set the photo down and suggested a different bridge, an easier one without a ghost standing on it. Ryan did not. He spread the balsa wood on the kitchen table, and he asked Lucy to tell him everything she remembered about that day, and he listened while a 7-year-old described a father she barely remembered, and he helped her build the exact bridge in the photograph plank by tiny plank, so that her father would be standing on something real. He learned in that hour how to be present beside someone else's memory without resenting it and without running from it. It was not a small thing. For a man who had spent 3 years unable to bear the sound of his own wife's name, it was enormous. Caleb was harder. Sophia came to a soccer game at Ryan's careful invitation, and she made herself as unobtrusive as she could, sitting a few rows down from where Ryan usually sat. Caleb was good, quick, and fearless on the field, and midway through the second half he broke away and scored, and the small crowd of parents cheered. And in the instant after the ball hit the net, Ryan saw his son do the thing he always did, the thing that broke Ryan's heart a little every single time. Caleb turned toward the stands and looked up to a specific spot high in the bleachers, the spot where Maya had always sat, the reflex of a boy still searching for a face that was no longer there. Except this time his eyes traveled down and found Sophia sitting where a mother might sit close to his father, and his whole body changed. He did not smile. He did not raise his arms. He turned deliberately away and jogged back to his position with his head down, and he did not look at the stands again for the rest of the game. Ryan felt the chill of it settle in his stomach. He knew his son. He knew that turning away was not nothing. It was the first low rumble of something gathering, and he told himself he would talk to the boy, find the right moment, and then the week got busy, and the right moment never quite came the way it never quite does until it is too late. The dinner was supposed to be the good part. All four of them at Ryan's house, the first time they had done it under one roof. Sophia cooked or tried to in an unfamiliar kitchen, and Ryan grilled, and the two children orbited each other with the wary politeness of kids who had been told to be nice. For most of the evening it worked. Lucy showed Caleb the bridge. Caleb, despite himself, admitted it was pretty good. There was a stretch of maybe 40 minutes where the four of them sat around the table, and it felt impossibly like the shape of something whole. Then Sophia, reaching for something kind to say, tasting the food Ryan had made, told him warmly that it reminded her of exactly the way her own mother used to cook. And she turned to Caleb to include him and said something gentle about how nice it was, all of them together like this, like a family. She meant nothing by it. She would replay it later and find nothing in it she could have known to avoid. But Caleb heard the word family and heard underneath it a door closing on his mother. His fork went down against the plate with a small, hard sound. He said he wasn't hungry anymore. And when Ryan told him quietly to sit back down and finish his dinner, the boy stood up so fast his chair scraped back and nearly toppled, and he said the thing out loud that he had been carrying turned away on that soccer field. "She's not my mom," Caleb said, his voice cracking high the way an 11-year-old's does when he is trying not to cry in front of people. "And she's never going to be. You can't just replace her like she didn't happen." Then he was gone up the stairs, and a door slammed hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall. The silence he left behind was the loud kind. Sophia sat very still, her hand still half raised from the gesture she had been making, and Ryan watched the color drain out of her face, and he understood that she was not seeing his kitchen anymore. She was seeing a 5-year-old asking every night for a month where a man had gone. She was watching in real time the exact thing she had built her whole careful rule to prevent playing out anyway in front of her, involving her daughter, who sat frozen and confused at the table wondering what she had done wrong. The fear Sophia had described to him over coffee was no longer a story she was telling. It was standing in the room. Lucy's small voice broke the quiet. "Did we do something bad?" "No, baby," Sophia said, and she reached for her daughter and pulled her close, and over the top of Lucy's head, she looked at Ryan with an expression he would not soon forget, an expression that said without any cruelty in it that she had been right to be afraid. They did not fix it that night. Sophia gathered Lucy and her coat and told Ryan gently that she thought it was best they head home and let him talk to his son. He walked them to the car. He wanted to say something that would hold it all together, and he could not find it because there was nothing honest to say. He watched her drive away, and then he went back inside to a house with a slammed door at the top of the stairs, and he stood at the bottom of them for a long time without climbing. The days after were heavy. Caleb barely spoke. Ryan tried once to raise it gently at breakfast, and the boy shut it down before he had finished the first sentence. And so the distance that had opened at the dinner table hardened into something colder and wider, and Ryan felt himself doing the thing he always did when a wound would not close. He went quiet. He worked longer hours at the yard. He let the silence do the talking, and the silence, as it always does, made everything worse. It came to a head on a night when the rain came back. Ryan and Caleb had really argued for the first time in years. It had started over nothing, a chore left undone, and it had found its way with terrible speed to the only subject that mattered. And Caleb had shouted that his father was trying to forget Mom, and Ryan had said something sharper than he meant, and the boy had gone to his room and would not come out. And Ryan, rattled and heartsick, and not thinking clearly, had gotten in his truck and driven, and his hands had taken him to Sophia's house without his fully deciding to go there, because some part of him needed to see the one person who had made the last few weeks feel survivable. He knocked. Sophia opened the door in the warm light of her hallway, took one look at his face, and the rain running off him, and started to ask what had happened. and Lucy, who should have been in bed, came running down the hall in her pajamas. At the sound of his voice, delighted the way small children are delighted, and she grabbed his wet hand in both of hers and looked up at him with her whole open, trusting face. And she asked him the question that would take him apart. "Are you going to stay?" The hallway went quiet. Sophia's hand tightened on the edge of the door. She knew better than anyone everything that was riding on how this man answered a 7-year-old's question, and Ryan knew it too. And that was the whole tragedy of the moment, because he could not lie to her. He was standing there fresh from a fight with his own son that he did not know how to fix, and this child was asking him to promise something he was not certain he could keep, and every honest thing in him, every hard-won piece of the man the Navy and grief had made, refused to hand a little girl a promise he might have to break. He crouched down to her level the way he had at the market, and he told her the truth, and it cost him more than she could possibly understand. "I can't promise that," Ryan said softly. "I wish I could, sweetheart, but I can't." He watched the words land on Lucy's small face without her fully understanding them, and he watched them land on Sophia's, where they were understood completely. Something closed in Sophia's expression, quiet and final. She drew her daughter back from him with careful hands. "I think you should go, Ryan," she said. Her voice did not rise. That was the worst of it. It did not rise at all. "I told you where I stood. I told you exactly. And I can't do this to her. I won't." He wanted to argue. He had no argument. Everything she was doing was the thing he would have done in her place. He stepped back off the porch into the rain, and the door closed, and a moment later, the porch light went dark. People will call a man cruel for saying "I can't promise that" to a crying child, but perhaps a man who has walked through storms understands something the rest of us would rather not, that a promise made in fair weather can become the deepest cut of all when the storm returns. He chose to carry the pain alone rather than hand a child a hope he was not yet sure he could keep. And honesty, even when it wounds us for a moment, is gentler than a sweet promise that leaves someone waiting at a door that never opens again. The house was too quiet in the days that followed the particular quiet Ryan had spent 3 years perfecting and now could no longer stand. He had built his whole life around silence. After Maya, silence had felt like safety, a way to keep the grief boxed up where it could not spill over onto his son. But something had changed in him over those few weeks with Sophia and Lucy, and now the silence in his house did not feel like protection. It felt like a door he had shut on the wrong side of. He moved through his days at the boatyard doing the work with his hands, while his mind stayed somewhere else entirely, out on a dark porch in the rain watching a light go off. Caleb was not speaking to him, not really, and Ryan finally understood that the boy's silence and his own were the same silence. He had taught his son this. Every time a hard thing had come and Ryan had gone quiet and buried himself in work rather than face it, Caleb had been watching, learning. The boy was not just grieving his mother anymore. He was doing exactly what his father had modeled for 3 years, retreating, shutting the door, choosing the safety of a closed heart over the risk of an open one. And Ryan realized, standing in his kitchen one evening looking at the stairs he had not been able to climb, that if he did nothing, he would not be protecting his son at all. He would be handing him a life built out of fear, the same cramped life Ryan had been living, and calling it love. He climbed the stairs that night. He knocked on Caleb's door and, getting no answer, went in anyway and sat down on the edge of the bed where his son lay facing the wall. For a while, he did not try to fix anything. He just sat, letting the boy feel him there. "I owe you an apology," Ryan said finally. "Not for caring about Sophia. I'm not going to lie to you and say that was a mistake. But for the way I've been, for going quiet on you, for letting you think you had to carry all this by yourself. That's on me." Caleb did not turn around, but his shoulders shifted. It was the boy himself who broke first, and he did it because of something Ryan could never have scripted. Caleb had spent the last week watching Lucy in his own mind, turning the whole thing over. And what stuck with him was not the dinner or the word family. It was something smaller. He had seen that night at the table before it all fell apart. The way the little girl lit up around his father, a girl who had also lost a parent, who had every reason to be closed off and afraid the way he was, and who had chosen instead to be open to grab a stranger's wet hand in a hallway and simply ask him to stay. She was younger than him. She had lost just as much, and she was braver about it than he was. "There's this thing Mom said," Caleb said, still facing the wall, his voice thick. "Before she got really sick, she told me she didn't want us to be sad forever. She said it like it was important, and I didn't get it then." He turned over at last, his eyes wet and rimmed red. "That little girl, Lucy, her dad's gone too, and she's not scared to like people. And I keep being so mad all the time, and I think Mom would be like disappointed in me for it." Ryan pulled his son against his chest, and the boy let him, and for the first time in 3 years, the two of them cried together instead of in separate rooms behind separate doors. "Your mom could never be disappointed in you," Ryan said into his hair. "Not ever. And loving somebody new, it doesn't take 1 inch away from her. It doesn't mean forgetting. It just means your heart got bigger to make room. That's all it ever means." Caleb wiped his face with the back of his hand, and when he spoke again, there was something new in his voice, something that had come out the other side of the anger. "You should go find her dad," he said. "Sophia, before it's too late. I messed it up. Let me help you fix it." That more than anything undid Ryan. His son had not just given permission, his son was pushing him toward the door. Reaching Sophia was another matter because Sophia had a rule, and Sophia was not a woman who bent her rules just because a man showed up looking sorry. Ryan knew that a phone call would not do it. A phone call was cheap. He had to show her, and he had to show her in the presence of both children, because the whole thing had never been about the two of them alone. It had always been about 4 people, or it was about nothing. He called her once. She almost did not pick up, and when she did, her voice was careful and distant, the voice of a woman protecting a wound. He did not try to argue his case over the phone. He asked her for one thing only. He asked her to bring Lucy to the beach on the North Shore that Saturday afternoon, the wide stretch of sand that faced out toward the open Atlantic. The one she had once mentioned was her favorite place in the world to think. He told her that if she came, he would say everything he needed to say, and that if she still wanted him gone afterward, he would go and never trouble them again. And then, because he had learned something about honesty, the hard way, he added that he was bringing Caleb, and that Caleb had asked to come. Something in that last part reached her. She agreed to come. Saturday arrived clear and cold and bright. The sky washed clean the Atlantic, rolling in long gray swells that broke white against the sand. Sophia came down the path holding Lucy's hand, uncertain, her guard up, and she found Ryan standing near the water with Caleb beside him, the boy who had shouted, "She's not my mom," now standing quietly at his father's side, having asked to be there. Lucy broke away and ran to Ryan the moment she saw him, because children forgive faster than the rest of us, and he caught her and lifted her up, and something in Sophia's chest tightened at the sight of it. Ryan set the girl down and walked to Sophia, and he did not launch into a speech. He was not a man of speeches. He looked at her, and then he looked down at Lucy, and he understood that the person he most needed to answer was not the woman at all. He lowered himself down onto one knee in the sand, and for a moment Sophia thought he had simply crouched to talk to her daughter again. Then she saw what was in his hand. "Lucy," Ryan said, and his voice was rough. "A while ago, you asked me a question, and I gave you an answer that I think hurt your mom, and hurt you, and I've been sorry about it every day since. You asked me if I was going to stay." He drew a breath of the cold sea air. "I couldn't promise you that night because I don't make promises I'm not sure I can keep. That's just how I'm built. But I'm sure now. I've never been more sure of anything. So I'm going to answer you the right way this time. Yes, I'm going to stay. For as long as you'll have me. That's a promise, and I don't break those." The little girl's face split into a smile, and she threw her arms around his neck and over the top of her head. Ryan lifted his eyes to Sophia, who had one hand pressed to her mouth. "I know your rule," he said to her. I know why you have it, and I think it's a good rule, and I would never ask you to break it. I'm not asking you to be almost certain about me. I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of my life proving you can be all the way certain. Both of you." His hand opened, and the ring caught the low gold light coming off the water. "Marry me, Sophia. Let me be a steady place for the three of you to stand." For a long moment, the only sound was the surf. Sophia looked at this large, scarred man kneeling in the sand with her daughter's arms around his neck and his son standing guard beside him, and she thought about the rule she had built out of grief and fear, the rule that had kept Lucy safe and kept them both alone. And she understood that certainty was never something a person was handed. It was something two people built plank by careful plank, the way Ryan had built a bridge with her daughter so that a dead man could keep standing on it. She had been waiting for a guarantee. What he was offering was better. He was offering to keep showing up. "Yes," she said, and then she was laughing and crying at once, and she said it again so there could be no mistaking it. "Yes." Caleb let out a whoop that startled a line of gulls off the sand, and Lucy demanded to know if this meant they were a family now, and the four of them came together on that cold, bright beach with the Atlantic at their backs, and no one was standing alone anymore. There was one more thing, and it belonged to Sophia alone. That same season, the community library on the south side finally opened its doors, the crumbling brick building she had spent so long imagining back into life. She walked through it on opening day and ran her hand along a door frame and felt something she had been carrying for 6 years finally set itself down. Daniel had taught in that building once. Now children would read in the rooms she had drawn for them. She had not needed Ryan to rescue her from her grief. She had done that work herself with her own hands, the same way he had done his. That was perhaps why they fit. Two people who had each learned to carry their own weight, choosing now to carry it side by side. The wedding came a year after the night in the rain. It was small and warm, held in a garden with string lights and folding chairs and too much food, the kind of gathering where nobody stands on ceremony. Logan was there, forgiven long ago, telling anyone who would listen that the whole thing had been his idea. Grace cried through the entire ceremony, and when the vows were done and the glasses had been raised, Lucy tugged at her mother's dress and announced that she had something to say, and someone lifted her up so she could reach the microphone. She stood there in front of everyone, 8 years old and utterly unafraid, and she looked out at the crowd and then at the tall man who had knelt in the sand for her. "Everybody says my dad Ryan used to save the world," Lucy said, her small voice carrying clear across the garden. "In the Navy and everything, but he didn't save the world." She looked right at him. "He saved me and my mom." The garden went still. Ryan crossed to her and his throat worked, and there were tears running openly down his weathered face. This man who had not let anyone see him cry in 3 years now, weeping in front of everyone he loved. He took the little girl into his arms and held her, and when he could finally speak, his voice broke on the words. "No, baby," he said. "You've got it backwards. You and your brother and your mom. You're the ones who saved me." Caleb came and leaned into his father's side, and Sophia wrapped her arms around all three of them, and the garden broke into applause that went on and on. 4 people who had each arrived carrying a loss too heavy to hold alone now, holding it together, which is the only way it has ever been possible to hold such a thing. Because a family is not something we are handed by blood. It is something we choose to build with hands still scarred from everything we have lost, and with just enough courage to reach across the distance and stay.